Before I begin today's lecture, I would like to ask you a simple question. Have you ever listened to a song, read a poetry, watched a sunset that revealed something so deeply about life, even though you could not explain it logically? If yes, then you have already experienced what John Keats called the truth of imagination. At a time when philosophers were searching for truth through reason, Keats made a radical claim. Imagination can be just as truthful as logic. In his formal letter to Benjamin Bailey, written on November 22nd, 1817, he explores this fascinating idea. Today, we will explain how this letter became one of the most famous statements of Romantic literary thoughts. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing well. If you are new to my channel, I am Dr. Riya Dattu and I make videos on English literature, English language and literary theories. If that is something of interest to you, consider subscribing and follow along. So without further ado, let us get into the lecture. Among the letters of John Keats, this particular letter, written to Benjamin Bailey on November 22nd, 1817, occupies a central position. Keats's letters are often regarded his most profound prose writings because they explore his poetic ideas more than his actual poems. In this particular letter, Keats develops several ideas that becomes central to his aesthetic, including the relationship between imagination and truth, the nature of human knowledge, and the role of poetic vision. This letter is specifically important because it contains one of Keats's most famous lines. What is the line? The line is, "What imagination seizes as beauty must be truth." This declaration forms the basis of Keats's aesthetics. It also anticipates his famous conclusions, which we later find in the poem Ode on a Grecian Urn. Beauty is truth, truth beauty. So, this letter becomes a bridge between Keats's earlier poetic experiments and the mature philosophical odes he has written in 1819. Let's first talk about the historical and biographical background of this particular letter. This year, 1817, is very crucial. At this time, Keats was 22 years old. His first volume of poetry is published, and he is deeply engaged with philosophy, literature, and the art of self discovery. He had formed close companionships with intellectuals such as Benjamin Bailey. Benjamin Bailey was studying in Oxford and shared Keats's ideas on religion, literature, and aesthetics. Their correspondence often moved beyond ordinary friendship into discussions of profound philosophical truths. The November 1870 letter emerged from one such discussions. In this letter, Keats explores the power of imagination, the limit of rational knowledge, the nature of beauty, the existence of truth, and the relationship between poetry and philosophy. The major concern addressed in this letter is, how do human beings arrive at truth? Traditional philosophy often assumes that truth is attained through logic, reason, and symmetric quality. But Keats proposes a different approach. He suggests that imagination possesses its own form of truth, one that cannot be reduced to rational argument. This marks a distinct romantic challenge to rational enlightenment. Keats's theory of imagination can be found in this line. The line goes like, "I am certain of nothing but the holiness of the heart's affection and the truth of imagination." Now, this statement needs careful observation. Let us look at it part by part. Let's talk about the holiness of heart's affection. By heart's affection, Keats mean human emotions, love, sympathy, and emotional responsiveness. The word holiness suggests that emotional experience possesses a sacred value. Keats rejects the idea that reason alone is the foundation of human life. Instead, he argues that feelings provides a different dimension of reality. For Keats, love reveals truth, compassion reveals truth, emotional responsiveness reveals truth. So, the heart becomes the source of knowledge. Let's look at the next part, the truth of imagination. So, this particular phrase is quite revolutionary. Keats argues that imagination is not merely a fantasy or illusion. Rather, imagination can reveal truths that are inaccessible through logical reasoning. For example, when a poet imagines beauty, love, transcendence, these experiences may not be scientifically verifiable, yet they possess profound truth. So, what happens? Imagination becomes the mode of perception. It allows humans to grasp realities beyond empirical observations. Another important line is that what the imagination sees as beauty must be truth. So, to understand this particular line, we need to break down each component. The first one is beauty as a form of truth. Keats proposes that beauty is not merely decorative or pleasurable. Beauty reveals something essential about existence. When imagination recognizes genuine beauty, it also perceives truth. But this does not mean every beautiful object is factually true. Instead, it means beauty discloses deeper realities. For Keats, beauty possesses epistemological value. It teaches us something about the world as well as ourselves. Unlike the classical thinkers who often associated beauty with order and symmetry, Romantic poets emphasized emotional intensity, spiritual insight, imaginative vision. Thus, beauty becomes the gateway to transcendence. A sunset, a poem, a song, or an act of love can reveal truths that logical empiricism might not be able to. Now, one of the central themes of this essay is the debate between reason and imagination. Keats does not completely reject reason. However, he fears excessive intellectualization. He writes critically of those who try to explain away beauty through logical reasoning. For Keats, reason often dissects and imagination synthesizes. Reason breaks the reality into parts, imagination sees the whole picture. This distinction appears repeatedly through Romantic poetry. This particular letter also shows the influence of William Shakespeare. Keats regarded Shakespeare as a supreme poet because he possesses extraordinary imaginative power. Unlike philosophers who imposes systems over reality, Shakespeare enters into diverse experiences without forcing them into rigid categories. This capacity influenced Keats's developing notion of poetic identity. The poet should not dominate the reality but participate in it. One of the striking features of this particular letter is Keats's skepticism towards absolute certainty. He writes, "I am certain of nothing." This statement does not indicate despair. Rather, it reflects intellectual humility. Keats recognizes that human knowledge is limited. Reality is complex. Mystery is unavoidable. Unlike philosophers who seek the final answer, Keats often embraces the uncertainty. This attitude later develops into his famous concept of negative capability. Although the term negative capability had been formulated in another letter a month before, this Bailey letter explores this intellectual framework. The negative capability refers to the capability to remain in uncertainties, in mystery, in doubts, without any irritable reaching after facts and reason. The November 22nd letter demonstrates this in action. Keats argues that truth is not always reached through logical reasoning. Sometimes wisdom requires the openness to ambiguity. Great poetry emerges from this openness. This letter poses an important question. Is poetry merely decorative, or does it possess philosophical significance? Clearly favors the second view. For him, poetry is a mode of knowing. Poetry reveals truth about human experience. Poetry expands consciousness. Thus, the poet becomes not simply an entertainer but a seeker of truth. However, poetic truth differs from scientific truth. Science explains, poetry illuminates. Science analyzes, poetry reveals. Both are valuable, but they operate differently. This letter also contains certain religious implications. Keats was not conventionally religious, yet he often used spiritual language. Words such as holy, truth, beauty suggest a quasi-religious worldview. For Keats, beauty assumes a role traditionally occupied by religion. Beauty becomes a source of meaning, a source of transcendence, a source of revelation. This reflects the romantic tendency to locate spiritual significance within art and within nature. This particular letter engages with several philosophical traditions. This is against Augustan rationalism. Rational thinkers emphasize logic, reasoning, symmetry. Keats argues that these are insufficient. Human experience contains dimensions that exceed rational experimentations. Empiricists, on the other hand, emphasize on sensory evidence. Keats acknowledges the sensory evidence, but insists that imagination transforms sensation into meaning. Reality is not merely perceived, it is imaginatively interpreted. This letter aligns closely with romantic idealism. To this perception, the mind actively shapes reality. Imagination participates in changing reality, and truth emerges through creative perception. So we can connect this letter with Keats's later poetry. His poem Ode to Nightingale explores imaginative escape and transcendence. Like this letter, the poem suggests that imagination can transport the mind into or from the ordinary reality. Then we also see his poem Ode on a Grecian Urn. The famous line, beauty is truth, truth beauty. This develops the insight first articulated in this particular letter. Then we also see in the poem The Ode to Autumn, it shows Keats's way to discover truth through sensory images and experiences. Various scholars have interpreted this letter in various ways. The strength can be said that it offers a powerful defense of romantic imagination. It expands the concept of truth beyond scientific explanation. It affirms the value of art and emotion. It anticipates modern discussion of aesthetic experience. Some critics argue that it's risks equating subjective feelings with objective truths. Questions remain. How can beauty guarantee truth? Are all imaginative experiences equally valid? These issues continue to generate scholarly debates. Why are we studying this letter today? We live in an age dominated by data, algorithms, positive outcome, and technology. Keats reminds us that human life cannot be explained statistically only. Emotional intelligence matters. Art possesses cognitive value. Imagination remains essential into understanding reality. His defense of creativity and imagination speaks directly to contemporary concerns about the place of humanities into modern education. That was my lecture on Keats's letter to Benjamin Bailey, written on November 22nd, 1817. I hope this was helpful. For more videos like this, keep an eye on my channel. and consider subscribing. Thank you. Bye bye.